You know, when we think about World War II, our minds immediately jump to these epic images, right? Heroic battles, brilliant generals, game-changing weapons. But what if I told you the war wasn't really won on the battlefield? What if it was actually won in the factories, on the supply lines, and in the minds of the people who pulled off what everyone thought was impossible? Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on that unseen war, the incredible logistical revolution that honestly decided the whole thing.
All right, so let me just ask you this straight up. What do you think was America's most decisive weapon in the Second World War? Was it the Sherman tank, the P-51 Mustang, or a donut? Yeah, I know, it sounds like a joke. A donut? But seriously, stick with me here, because the answer to that question reveals this absolutely fundamental truth about how modern wars are fought. It's a truth that one side completely got, and the other, well, they miscalculated so badly it cost them everything.
So to really get what happened, you first have to understand the old school way of thinking. And nobody represented that better than the German military, the Wehrmacht. I mean, they were widely seen as the most professional, the most feared fighting force on the planet. And their whole philosophy? It was built on this foundation of tactical genius, doing more with less, and this almost mystical belief in the power of pure will. And this quote, this says it all. This is from Field Marshal von Rundstedt, one of their top guys. And this wasn't just him spouting propaganda. He, and the rest of the high command, genuinely believed this. Their experience on the Eastern Front had taught them that a soldier's fighting spirit, his sheer will to win, could make up for shortages in equipment. To them, war was an art, a test of character.
This right here is exactly how they saw the world. When German intelligence got their hands on American military plans, they saw these numbers and they just laughed. 45 pounds of stuff for every soldier every single day? They were getting by on 20. They didn't see strength in that number. No, they saw weakness. They saw a soft consumer army that needed its candy bars and cigarettes just to keep fighting.
So after running all the numbers, based on their own hard-won experience, the German High Command came to a very firm, very logical conclusion. A huge, sustained invasion across the beaches of Normandy, it was impossible. Not just difficult, mathematically impossible. Their own experts said the math just didn't work. No army in history had ever pulled something like that off. It was pure fantasy.
But then came June 6, 1944, and on that day, German mathematics came crashing head-on into American reality. D-Day wasn't just an attack, it was the moment someone turned on a faucet, opening a logistical floodgate that would end up drowning the entire German war machine.
Just look at these numbers for a second. The Germans figured the Americans could land at their absolute best, maybe 8,400 tons of supplies a day. In reality, the Americans were landing almost double that, 15,000 tons a day, right onto open beaches. And here's the kicker. The entire German army group defending France was getting by on a measly 1,140 tons a day. The Americans were outsupplying them more than 10 to 1 right from the jump.
And this is where you start to see this completely different mindset, this industrial logic. Some of the ships hitting the beaches on D-Day weren't just carrying tanks and ammo, they were literally floating bakeries. They were baking fresh bread for the soldiers while they were crossing the English Channel. Now, if you're a German general, this is pure insanity. You're wasting precious cargo space for a bakery. But for the Americans, it made perfect sense. It was a message. An army that can give you fresh bread under fire can give you anything else you need, forever.
German spies knew the Allies were building these weird concrete things over in Britain, but they just wrote it off. An artificial harbor in the choppy English Channel? No way. They figured, best case scenario, it might handle 1,000 tons a day. Well, within 12 days of D-Day, the American Mulberry Harbor alone was handling 7,000 tons a day. That's 7 times their most optimistic guess.
Can you just put yourself in this German officer's shoes for a minute? You're looking through your binoculars at the coast, and you watch an entire working port just appear, where last week there was nothing but water. Suddenly, this isn't just a supply problem for you. It's a psychological gut punch. If they can build harbors from scratch, what can't they do?
And that's really the heart of it. This whole thing wasn't just about moving supplies from point A to point B. The sheer, overwhelming, unbelievable amount of American stuff became a weapon all on its own. It was a kind of psychological warfare, maybe unintentional, but absolutely devastating.
Which brings us back to the donut. Okay, check this out. Just 40 days after D-Day, with insane fighting still going on, this vehicle lands in France. It's basically a truck staffed by American women, and its only job is to drive near the front lines and make fresh donuts and coffee for the troops. German intelligence actually intercepted reports about this and thought it had to be fake propaganda. I mean, who in their right mind would risk civilians and waste fuel like this in a war zone?
But it was very, very real. And this letter from a GI just captures how surreal it all was. This wasn't happening miles away in a safe zone. This was happening so close to the fighting, you could hear it. Imagine what that does for your morale as an American soldier. And then imagine the complete and utter disbelief of a German soldier who hears stories about it.
And if you think the donuts were crazy, this might be the most mind-blowing logistical flex of the entire war. Thanksgiving 1944. The U.S. Army decides every single one of its soldiers in Europe is getting a hot, traditional Thanksgiving dinner. We're talking 1,604 tons of frozen turkey, shipped across the Atlantic, kept frozen in a chain of refrigerated trucks and trains, all the way to the front lines, served hot in a foxhole. Once again, German intelligence heard about it and just dismissed it as an obvious lie meant to fool them.
This is how that abundance became a weapon. It absolutely crushed the will to fight. This German soldier's letter, it says everything. When the prisoners you capture are eating better than your own troops, you realize you're not just fighting an army anymore. You're fighting an entire economy. You are literally fighting the wealth of a nation.
So, the big question is, how? How did the Americans turn something that was mathematically impossible into just another Tuesday? Well, it came down to systems. Massive, powerful, industrial-scale systems that the German military mind just couldn't wrap its head around.
You see, as General Patton's tanks were blazing across France, by all German logic, they should have ground to a halt. They were outrunning their supplies. But they didn't. And the reason is this: the Red Ball Express. Just try to picture it. A non-stop 24/7 convoy of nearly 6,000 trucks running a continuous 700-mile loop to the front and back. The drivers, 75% of whom were African-American soldiers in segregated units, were the absolute lifeblood of that advance. They drove through exhaustion, enemy attacks, everything, and they kept those engines running, sometimes moving more supplies in one day than an entire German army got in a week.
And this feeling went right to the top. This German general, who commanded one of their best panzer divisions, said his elite forces were basically ground into dust, not by better tactics, but by what he called an industrial process. It was a whole new kind of war, and they were on the wrong side of the assembly line.
And if the truck convoys weren't enough, there was this. They called it Pluto, for pipeline under the ocean. The Allies literally laid flexible fuel pipelines on the bottom of the English Channel and just started pumping fuel directly to their advancing armies. One German commander famously said that when they found out the Americans were just pumping fuel straight from England to their tanks, they knew it was over. How do you defeat an enemy who can just decide that geography doesn't apply to them anymore?
So why are we talking about this today? Why does any of this matter to you now? Because the systems they invented to supply an army in 1944, they didn't just vanish after the war. Oh no, they evolved, and they now run the entire world you live in, from the foxhole straight to your front door.
Look at this family tree, so to speak. The exact same logistical genius that made D-Day possible was turned around to rebuild Europe under the Marshall Plan. Then, fast forward to the 1960s, and places like Harvard Business School start seriously studying these military methods. That's the birth of what we now call supply chain management. So the next time you click Buy Now on a website and a package shows up on your doorstep the next day, you are looking at the direct descendant of the Red Ball Express. Just-in-time delivery, Amazon Prime, global shipping, it all has its roots right here.
And here it is, the final verdict from the guy who literally invented the Blitzkrieg, Heinz Guderian. This is an absolutely stunning admission. He's saying that all their tactical brilliance, all their battlefield genius, in the end, it didn't matter, because the Americans brought something much, much more powerful: the ability to just keep going forever.
And this quote from another top German general might be the most perfect summary of the entire war. It was a completely different way of thinking. It came down to the very question each side was trying to answer. The Germans were asking, how do we win this battle? The Americans were asking, how do we supply this army? One question is about a moment in time, the other is about building a system. And history has a funny way of showing us which questions matter more.
So, we end up here, with this question. What that logistical revolution in 1944 really showed us is that a modern war isn't just a clash of soldiers, it's a clash of systems. And it makes you wonder, in a conflict between nations, who really wins? The one with the best fighters on the front line,
or the one with the best supply chain 1,000 miles behind it? The answer from World War II seems pretty clear. But that question? Well, it's just as important today as it was then.